bring my other glasses so I could see far. Oh. All right, I think, thank you for the Godfather theme or whatever. Yeah. Welcome everyone to the Planning Commission meeting of Thursday, September 7th, 2023. I will note for the record that everyone is present, and I'm going to ask Epi if you could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Epi, and thank you for all of the work you've done for us. We all appreciate it. I'm wishing you the best. Let's see. Approval of agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
No opposed, so that's approved. Announcements. Do you want me to start? Oh, Wendy doesn't have any. Dennis, do you have any announcements?
Nope.
John?
Nothing tonight.
Nothing.
Bob? And you don't need to make any, no announcements for you or, okay. Then we'll move on to oral communication. So first okay, I've got a couple of cards, but these are on this item, number 4. Okay, so if there's anybody in the audience who wants to speak on an item that's not on the agenda, this is the time. But I don't have any cards and I don't see anybody else. I only see people who are here for item number 4. So, okay, so then we'll go on. The next is consent items, approval of the minutes for August 3 and adoption of resolution 2023-753. Does anybody want any changes, or is there a yes?
Shouldn't Commissioner Steele and my absences be excused?
I'm sorry.
Our absences from that meeting, they're not marked as excused
Let me get my glasses, okay.
On the minutes,
on the minutes.
it says absent.
I know, but it doesn't say excused.
Or it doesn't say an excused absence.
Right.
Oh, I see.
So,
Does that mean you need a motion to approve the minutes?
on the minutes for August 3, it says absent by, 2 people were absent. So do we need to say that, Michael, that they're excused? Does it matter?
It doesn't really matter. No.
No? Okay.
There's no legal effect of
Yeah, I
thing,
mean,
but you know the commission can more than.
Do they get marked off like tardies or something? And
no.
Their grade gets lowered if they're absent too many times?
But the minutes can be amended to
Well,
reflect
John
that
and
they're
Bob weren't
excused
here, so-
absences.
Right.
Okay, I'll move approval of the minutes as revised to reflect that the absences of Commissioner Leah and Commissioner Mueller were excused.
I'll second.
Good. All those in favor?
Aye.
Good. See, they have to bring in slips for their excuses. Okay. So, and then the other item is, let me get back to the agenda, is resolution 2023-753.
Chair Harrison, we've actually skipped through a couple things.
I'm sorry. Okay. Oh, that's right. We haven't, well, let's just finish this and we'll go back to the presentation. I keep on missing that one. So resolution 2023-753, is there a motion to approve that?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I abstained since I wasn't.
Okay, so that passes with 1 abstention. And I'm sorry, Michael, I keep on missing this. Presentations, this is a presentation on adaptive reuse by Roberto Vasquez, Project Director at Omgivning, which I think is Swedish for environment. So is there a presentation?
Good evening. I'm not going to do a presentation, but what I did is I asked Roberto to come in and give a presentation to the Planning Commission regarding adaptive reuse. And the reason why I asked Roberto to come in is, number one, I met Roberto a couple months ago at a Valley Economic Alliance meeting. Actually, Commissioner Washburn was part of that meeting as well, where we were discussing in a housing think tank about ways to increase housing supply throughout the region. Different people from the Valley Economic Alliance presented different options, and Roberto discussed adaptive reuse. The reason why I wanted the Planning Commission to hear Roberto's presentation is because adaptive reuse is a program that was identified as in our housing element that the city is required to take on within the next couple years to be in compliant with our housing element. So in a nutshell, adaptive reuse is taking an existing building and that for whatever reason may be functionally obsolete or no longer used for its original purpose, like an office building, for example, and converting it into a new purpose like housing. So with that, I will turn it over to Roberto, and I thought that he had a very interesting and enlightening presentation last time.
Thank you, Michael. Okay, sorry, Roberto, for skipping you, but go ahead, please.
No problem. Thank you, commissioners, for having me here today. Thank you, Michael, for the introduction. And so I'm just going to share my screen here. I just want to make sure that everyone can see it. And also thank you for allowing me to join virtually. I think my family appreciates that. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go to slideshow here. Great. So, you know why I'm here. Roberto Vasquez, project director with Givney. Givney's architecture design firm. We've started our firm in 2009, and since our founding, we've touched over 500 existing buildings. And because we were experts in our field, and really we became experts because of adaptive reuse, as Michael had explained. So I'll give our little spin on adaptive reuse because Michael already gave a presentation or a little couple words on that. Dive into why it's important. Kind of jump into, what the current narrative is. I think it's important for us to kind of discuss all those different talking points, barriers to adaptive reuse. Spend probably about half the presentation talking about going through case studies, and definitely want to leave enough time for questions. So all in, it's about 20 to 25 minutes as far as the presentation. So, yes, it's about changing underutilized or obsolete buildings into new uses, but we really believe adaptive reuse is about uncovering potential. And the joy that we get as designers, as community stakeholders, to bring new life into otherwise underutilized properties is very exciting. So, to us, that's a very personal thing as far as what adaptive reuse is, what it can be, and how it can all shape our communities for the betterment of the entire community. So, why is it important? Well, first and foremost, adaptive reuse is important to address the housing crisis. It's been noted that it can take approximately 80 years to offset the negative climate impact associated with demolition of an existing building and then the replacement, reconstruction of a new building in its place, even if that new building is using all the efficient energy technology of its time when compared to repurposing an existing building. So, right, demolish, build new, take 80 years to offset that negative climate impact associated with that when compared to just repurposing an existing building. So we really can't afford the carbon impact on our community to demolish and build new. We really need to find new ways to encourage the reuse of our existing building stock because really our environment can't afford that carbon. So that's reason number one why it's important. And then also, reason number two is it can be a great tool to help address the housing crisis in our state of California. And while, every region is required to develop, a certain amount of units, big or small, adaptive reuse can be a great tool to take an underutilized building and convert it to new residential units in its place. So those are kind of two reasons why adaptive reuse is important. In terms of the narrative of adaptive reuse, we're going to dissect this, I think, at a few levels, but at a very high level, it's very important to separate it into two kind of aspects. There's suitability, which to us is an existing building suitable to be converted to a new use? And that really has to be from more of a design, a volume perspective, the size of the building. Can that be converted to a new use? And what we've uncovered, having worked on this for almost 2 decades now, is that we have yet to find an existing building, whether it's an existing office building or an existing industrial building, that is not a good suitable candidate to be converted to residential units. It's really requires, yes, sometimes creative solutions, and that's where designers come into play. And that's different than financial viability. So, that narrative that's out there is that we commonly hear, and I think it's been in the press, that, only 30% of existing office buildings are suitable candidates to be converted to residential units. Well, that's not what this expert is saying. That's not what we've uncovered through our decades of working with this building type. It's really becomes financial viability is kind of the barrier into adaptive reuse. And so let's dive into, what are those financial barriers and how do we break them down to, once again, encourage the reuse of our existing buildings to say much needed housing. So in terms of barriers, the first barrier we've generally observed is the cost of acquisition of an existing building. So because we're an LA-based firm, a lot of the statistics I'll be speaking about today are very focused in city of Los Angeles, specifically in the downtown historic core. So historically, what we were seeing kind of at the height of the pandemic, when office buildings were really trading at kind of the peak market value, we were seeing that an office building would be trading for about $500 per square foot. Okay, so that was early on in the pandemic when valuations were kind of increasing. I think we all kind of saw our homes increase in values a little bit too during that time. And since then, right, there's been kind of a real eye-opening occurrence as far as, at least in downtown, is, okay, are those office buildings really valued at that much? Because are people really going to the office as much as they were before the pandemic? And the answer is no. And so what we were seeing is those same buildings that were trading at about $500 a square foot or being offered to be purchased at $500 a square foot are now at a significantly reduced value of maybe $150 to $175 a square foot. So that narrative is, well, it's very expensive, is starting to change because the acquisition to acquire a building has been significantly reduced. And we believe that it's only going to reduce more and more, specifically in downtown Los Angeles, as, once again, there's a less demand in office buildings. So that makes it much more viable to convert it to a new use, say residential, when the acquisition is lower. But the thing that is really a challenge with adaptive reuse is kind of these tenant lease agreements. And this is also why I think, tenant lease agreements work on both sides. When we tour an existing building, a lot of times we're asking as far as like, well, what is the occupancy level of that existing building? And a lot of times a building owner might say, hey, we're doing pretty good. We're at 70% occupied or 80% occupied. And that's part of the story is, okay, well, what is that based on leases? But then the follow-up question we usually have is, okay, well, what's the physical occupancy? Like, how many people are actually showing up to those office buildings and using those spaces? And then the narrative kind of changes. So it's like, well, maybe 30% as far as what the building could hold. And so because these lease agreements are structured very differently in terms of long-term leases, or maybe 5 years, 10 years, we've seen leases as high as 20 years, it's really kind of too soon to say, okay, this is where the office market is going to settle, because there's penalties for a company to cancel their lease. They have to pay a large penalty, so they might just ride it out. In turn, if a building developer wants to purchase an existing office building, in order to terminate their leases, right, they would pay a penalty. So, those are some of those challenges we see. So, maybe a solution to these lease challenges is a partial change of use. And we can get into that perhaps later, maybe in questions and answers. But those are solutions that we're starting to explore, is what is a partial change of use to encourage the reuse of an existing building. The other barrier is construction costs, right? So that's another narrative we also hear is, hey, we've heard adaptive reuse is very expensive. We started to think about it. We understand our office vacancies are low, but we heard it's really expensive. And I think this is where we have to, peel that onion at many levels, is okay, well, what are we talking about? And in the previous slide, we showed, downtown Los Angeles, the historic core, many old historic buildings. Well, an office building that was constructed 100 years ago is going to be more costly to convert to residential than maybe a more recent past office building that is converted to residential. Also, furthermore, one of the RAND Corporation, they recently issued a white paper on adaptive reuse. And what they uncovered is it can be 48% more economical as far as cost per unit to do adaptive reuse than it is to demolish and build new units. So there's a lot of moving narratives. I wouldn't say false, but we really have to look at what is the building type. And specifically on the RAND paper, they were looking at low-rise hotels, motels, and how those can be easily converted to residential. So every building is different, and it needs to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. I think that's what we're trying to encourage here is more, we can't just say these broad strokes that it's very expensive, it can't be done, because, right, the city of Los Angeles has been very successful in their adaptive reuse, in so much that they've taken approximately X amount of square footage of office building and converted it to 12,000 new residential units. And it's been so successful. That ordinance was introduced in 1999 that it's since expanded, and we'll get into that in a little bit later as far as where that is now and where that's going. So the other thing is discretionary approvals, right? These are barriers to adaptive reuse. So if, say, a building owner or developer is looking at taking an existing office building and converting it to residential, a lot of times it might not comply with existing zoning codes. And this is where I think everyone in this room has an opportunity to see, okay, if this is something that we'd like to explore, what are the type of incentives that we can put into our zoning codes that would relax zoning codes? Say an office building doesn't have side yards, right? So that's one of the things that we've been working with, is understanding that an office building doesn't have side yards. Let's waive that requirement in order to allow it to be converted to residential uses. Once again, City of Los Angeles has been hugely successful, and I'm not saying that City of Calabasas needs to go this way, but the part of their success is that they've really removed all risk and uncertainty in terms of planning, zoning approval when it comes to adaptive reuse. They say, hey, you can change this office building to residential units by right. It doesn't require any sort of discretionary approval, but there's always exceptions, right? There is a certain community that has a certain community overlay, so there are certain zoning administrative approvals that you got to get. So in a broad brush, that was kind of the genesis and goal of their 1999 adaptive reuse ordinances. They were trying to allow it all by right. Since then, there's been additional layers to meet every community's needs. But right, that is a big barrier that can be removed. Is like, hey, we encourage adaptive reuse, and maybe it's a very low level zoning administrator approval that's required, and not a big lengthy approval with hearings, et cetera, and we can get into all of those details. Once again, City of Los Angeles has been very successful in doing this since 1999, in so much that they've taken the downtown community plan, and they're taking the adaptive reuse ordinance that was written in 1999 and adding increased incentives. They want to see more adaptive reuse. They want to see, so they allow a rooftop, one-story rooftop addition, regardless of use, to be added by right. They have removed density requirements, and those are things I think City of Calabasas should look at. Is maybe there's ways to increase density in order to increase the financial viability of adaptive reuse. So that's on the left. Those are incentives. Some of those same incentives are on the right, as far as this bridge ordinance. They recently introduced in May of 2023 a citywide adaptive reuse ordinance. And so, similar to Michael said, is, hey, City of Calabasas, as part of their housing element, is supposed to explore this adaptive reuse or element. This tool. City of Los Angeles had similar language, and so they have a citywide policy that's been introduced, and that's really going to be isolated to housing. So the one on the left, the downtown, any use. Hotels can be allowed, office to office, et cetera. The one on the right is really for citywide is a housing tool. So as far as the next 10 minutes, gonna kind of spend a little bit of time diving into case studies. And our first case study is a strip mall. And, you know, I'm actually from a small town. And so when I think of adaptive reuse, I can kind of see adaptive reuse in a strip mall, and it doesn't have to be a big urban center. So the strip mall is very exciting. In this case, it's on Santa Monica in a amenity rich area, good schools. It's underperforming, and it has an opportunity to be converted to healthy, livable units. Once again, once the citywide adaptive reuse ordinance approved, and there's an opportunity to bring those units to market pretty quickly at a low cost. And so, why quickly? Well, the building's already there. Why at a low cost? Well, it's a low-rise building, more of recent past, and there's less alterations that need to occur when compared to what I mentioned earlier, a 100-year historic building. So those are some benefits to this specific case study. Additionally, in this area, it's a real commercial corridor, and you know, we believe that when introducing new uses such as residential to a commercial corridor, this mixed use environment really creates a vibrant community. Here in Los Angeles, we use the word, you know, 24/7 community, vibrant community, but really the idea is that these uses aren't only isolated to day uses, and then when nighttime occurs, you know, it's kind of dark and quiet. When you have a mixed use environment with residential, with commercial, it can be vibrant. It doesn't necessarily need to be loud, but it can be lively and healthy. So that's another advantage. Additionally, what we've understood from exploring this case study is that when taking an existing strip mall and converting it to a new residential use, that there's a reduction in parking that occurs because the strip malls have a lot of in and out traffic. People come in, buy goods, leave. When you compare that to a residential use, it's a lot less in. Perhaps someone comes home from work and then they stay. So what I'm getting at is that parking that was maybe at grade could become another amenity, such as a public garden that serves this community or maybe serves a larger community. And as mentioned earlier, some of these strip malls occur in resource-rich areas with good schools, good transportation near jobs, et cetera. And because of the low cost of construction, of conversion, if there's certain policy incentives in place, such as reduced discretionary approval, that these units can be delivered at an affordable rate. They don't necessarily need to be coveted, protected, state-funded, affordable units. These can be affordable by design, meaning a building owner can acquire an existing building at a reduced cost, as mentioned earlier, develop it, construct it at a reduced cost, and therefore can bring units that are affordable by design. They don't need to charge so much, or they don't need to develop necessarily luxury units because of all those factors. They can produce more affordable units by design. Case study 2 is a recent past office building. This building is located in the city of Pasadena. And, you know, once again, all the same benefits as far as healthy, livable units, speed to market, low conversion cost, really vibrant mixed use opportunities, reduction in parking, because just like a retail, the office component has a large parking demand, a lot of people coming in and out. So when we change these uses to residential, even a partial use to residential, when we even analyze it per code, the parking can get reduced. So, but another benefit to this project is it is in the city of Pasadena. If it was in the city of Los Angeles, it would require a seismic upgrade. Because it's in the city of Pasadena, those local codes don't require a seismic upgrade. So that can contribute to the low cost. So it really, once again, isn't a global brush we can paint and say adaptive reuse is very expensive. We really have to look at it case by case, location by location, even building type by building type and date of construction. All of those things are moving factors. For the third case study, this one is in Philadelphia, actually. So, you know, interesting enough, this is another large floor plate type of building. While it's industrial, not office, it is large floor plate. And this developer came to us trying to understand, hey, is it a suitable candidate to be converted to residential? We were working with another architect, this is the developer's words, and we were running into issues because it was becoming very cost prohibitive. They were carving in new light wells, which were triggering all sorts of seismic upgrades. And so while it is in Philadelphia on the East Coast, we don't think of seismic. If you alter a building too much, it can increase costs significantly. So when we looked at this, we were like, okay, let's learn more about this building. And it was originally for the Navy yards, and it used to store tanks. And so it had a large capacity to store other items. And so we looked at that and we're like, well, why don't we use that large floor plate and park cars in the center of the building? And so that's kind of what we can see in this image on the top right, is a real nice creative parking solution, an opportunity to create a challenge that is now amenity. If it's a multifamily unit, what a great amenity is to be able to park near your unit. So, when working with adaptive reuse, we really want to listen to what a building wants to be. And in this case, we were able to avoid costly seismic upgrades. We also explored, ground floor opportunities with the client. And that's another opportunity when looking at adaptive reuse and mixed uses. These ground floor amenities can be patron, they can be retail, they can be coffee shops, et cetera. And when you provide certain density, then these spaces can thrive. And there's economic prosperity that can occur. And we'll get into that even in more detail on this last and final case study, which is ground floor. So this is a new building. It was recently constructed in 2015, 2016. It's in downtown Los Angeles, and it had really no problem leasing up in terms of being a residential tower. The struggles were occurring in the ground floor retail. The pandemic has hit. Ground floor retail has only suffered even more since then. And so we were looking at this as, well, how do we create opportunities to bring new life into this ground floor, and what are the benefits of that? And so looking at this, we thought that a live-work unit would be appropriate. It could be someone who lives there in the back part of the unit, and then they work there. Maybe it's a small retail shop, maybe it's a small maker space. And then we get into this idea of blended uses, which is even more vibrant than mixed use, and really creates a real interesting streetscape. Because once again, density can we believe really yields to strengthen the local economy, strengthening those local retailers. We're seeing it right now in downtown Los Angeles with the office market or the financial district, where those office tenants, they might, those buildings might be leased up, but that physical occupancy isn't at that level. There's a lot less foot traffic, and therefore these ground floor retailers are suffering, and some of them unfortunately have closed shop and moved out. So those are case studies. And just circling back to these tools that we have as far as design tools to work on existing buildings, whether specifically if they're a large floor plate. It's not the floor plate size that is really the challenge. It's really the depth of the unit that we need to be sensitive about. We can't have units that are too deep, because then, as far as away from the window, because not enough natural light comes in there. But at the same time, when working in urban centers or looking at maybe commercial corridors, there are benefits to putting a bedroom tucked in, and it doesn't maybe get direct natural light, but it gets indirect natural light. So this image kind of on the bottom kind of shows how you would, here's a corridor, you would enter the unit this way, the light is up here, and we tuck the unit in the back, and we provide clear story lighting to allow natural light to filter in. And then there's an opportunity to add maybe a second bedroom that maybe has more storefront, floor to ceiling type glazing, a lot more natural light, or maybe that's a den or an office. And really what we found through these building typologies is really the living unit wants to be closest to the natural air and the natural ventilation, so the kitchen, the living, the dining, that's where you spend a lot of your time. And so you want to locate that near those operable windows. But once again, because it's the depth of the unit, and that's where we want to we can't go beyond this like 60-foot depth that we found that becomes kind of unlivable. There's other opportunities to carve away space. So in this building, this is the same Navy Yards in Philadelphia, where we added these recessed balconies. So this much needed outdoor amenity space can be tapped into. So then that's really kind of a benefit to adaptive reuse, is kind of carving out spaces for amenities. So, we hope is that we can continue to shape and change this narrative, and that we understand that almost all projects are suitable candidates for adaptive reuse. It's like, how can we make those financially viable? How can the Planning Commission look at incentivizing adaptive reuse? We just gave a few examples as far as reduced discretionary approval, increased density, relaxed zoning codes such as side yards. So all those things can make a project more financially viable. Then, right, this can be a great tool to help address housing crisis and definitely help combat climate change.
Thank you so much, Roberto. Wait, let me turn this down. Okay, I guess there's less feedback now. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure some people here have some questions or comments. So does anybody, Wendy, do you have any questions or comments?
Well, my comment is thank you for that presentation. It was excellent, and it was very informative and gives us a lot to think about. But at this point, I don't have any questions.
Dennis?
I have a whole bunch of comments and questions.
Go
as
ahead.
well.
I have
I
some.
don't want to monopolize the evening, so if
Nope.
anyone wants to go before me, I'm happy.
Go ahead.
Well, Michael passed around a really very interesting story about the quality of life in Calabasas, and we're actually the number one most enviable for, I guess, quality of life in the nation out of 175 cities that were ranked, so you can look that up. And we've done that in 32 years in this community. This report is very enlightening because it tells you what's happening in San Francisco and Chicago and in New York City and every place else that doesn't have the commitment to quality of life, as well as the development of community facilities that are adequate to the needs and interests of the people who live here. We have the great good fortune to have 24,000 people thereabouts in 14 square miles, and a commitment of our community to deal with the development of community services as well as quality of life and preserving those things that are in fact really valuable. So part of my concern is that we're learning what the other large cities have done in order to deal with basically the threat from Sacramento and SB 9 and 10 and all the other enabling legislation that deals with that. So the report is very helpful to realize what kinds of things they're facing, that because we have developed the community that we have in this manner, we're not facing these, other than we have a RENA requirement, regional housing needs, I guess, assessment of 353 units between now and the next RENA cycle. And if we recognize what we have in this community, 43% of our land is actually in public serving and or conservation or open space and parkland use. Not always at our expense. In fact, that's a pretty neat thing that a lot of the parkland that's here has been funded by the county, the state, and the federal government in dealing with providing adequate park and recreation space and resource conservation and so forth. So the housing equation, and my question originally to Michael Klein was, what can we do to investigate the things that are technically possible and even probable, and that this report is the first to say, hey, what is everybody else doing? very helpful to see it. But most of our commercial conversions are going to be, low-rise, maybe. I mean, right now, I don't think we have much over 3 stories in the whole city, and we have a 35-foot height limit. So if we're talking about, knocking down the house or the commercial properties or converting them across the street here, that's one thing. But, we have proposals in front of the city right now to build essentially low-rise, mid-rise, high-rise apartment buildings, and dealing not with distributed processing of the burden of providing for housing and affordable housing or housing affordability as a concept, or even the location of those things. So one of the things that I hope that in our investigations between now and when we get down to actually implementing the next housing element that we've had approved by Sacramento, I'm hoping that we can actually learn from the conditions that have put us where we are today. Because if you look at what was done to this territory from basically Calabasas to Westlake Village and all the way down to Malibu, that was done under a development philosophy and policy set that was set by the Board of Supervisors. And they've learned from us here in Calabasas, Agoura Hills, Westlake Village, and Malibu how to protect the environment and provide for housing and for business and economic development and so forth. We didn't have any parks in Calabasas in 1991. We had one park in Saratoga Hills. And since then, we've got something like really 200 or 300 acres and buildings, including this place that we're in, and our senior center and our buildings for community engagement and involvement, which is that whole thing that Michael's passing along in the article makes me think about, which is we're enviable because we did, in fact, adjust the way we dealt with the development of our community, and we're doing that as we speak. And again, thank you to Michael and to our speaker tonight. It helps us see what makes us unique. So I have a whole bunch of things that I'm hoping that we'll ultimately discuss, and I don't want to bother everybody by saying that this is the place that we solve the problems, but I'm hoping that we won't take an LA City focus and certainly not an LA County focus, because that's what got us into trouble on the land and in this environment in the first place, and it's taken us 32 years to try to adjust that, and we're being sued for some of the decisions we've made. So I mean, it's that difficult to make these kinds of policy changes. So I have some questions. Do you get housing credit for hotel rooms?
No, you do not.
Why not?
In order for it to qualify...
No, that's a rhetorical question. I'm sorry, Michael. But, the answer to the question is no, the cities don't. And the bed tax or transient occupancy tax in our city goes directly into our budget and provides for the benefit of our community. And I can tell you that in the city of LA and most of the county of LA, TOT goes downtown. You never know whether it comes back to actually help the territory, like Warner Center. They've got several hotels, but all that TOT goes downtown. Does it come back here in terms of street improvements, in terms of lighting improvements and whatever else? That's all the issues that we have to face in doing housing policy in our community, and we do a good job of it. And that's a credit to all the councils that have been, all the planning commissions that have been, and the staff that is determined always to keep us on the right track and get us out of trouble and move us along as well. So I'm hoping in this that, we have very few strip malls to convert. We have low-rise commercial and retail and so forth that can be adapted, as we did in Old Town just recently with a major investment in the streetscape in order to focus on the quality of life issues as well as the business and the housing and the historical preservation interests of our community. Just try to find, what the budget is in LA County or LA City to preserve those things. And it's interesting in our town in that the Leonis Adobe is the LA City's, the museum and the property on which the cantina and the animals and the Native, Native American Education Park and so forth are, that's all in the city of LA. And it's LA's historic and cultural monument #1. And it was created, and that was the initiation of our incorporation is to protect Old Town. Even though the Cantina and the Adobe Museum and the park are in the city of LA, we use that as a means of getting out of essentially county policy and whatever. And we've managed to deal with reducing the impact of this very property we're on. There's 67 acres here, I think. And instead of having 2.1 million square feet of LA County described retail, commercial, I don't think there was any housing, in fact, in the original.
Movie theaters, it was big.
Movie theaters, I mean, all that stuff happened under us, as opposed to dealing with the plans of LA County, taking this 67 acres and turning it into just more Warner Center and apartments,
Yeah.
which is what has happened down the hill. Nothing bad about that. LA needs to do that. And I think, Roberto, you've shown us very clearly that every major metropolitan area has that kind of impact on it. So I know that we don't have to deal with what we have here in the same manner, but it's just as difficult to deal with what we have, given that we have to build 353 housing units, of which 200 have to be so-called county housing affordability units. We haven't even talked about workforce housing yet, and that, in fact, might even be a means by which we invent new solutions in our community. And I would like to recommend that we deal with a distributed housing development and burden analysis, meaning that instead of putting in 200 units in a particular place, you say, can I put 12 here and 30 there and 24 over there and so forth, or convert so many square feet of existing commercial or retail in order to provide for that 200 of the demand of the SB 9 and 10 housing requirements that the city has. One of the other burdens that I worry about is that property tax is a large percentage of what a city like LA has. They get 23% of the property tax. Calabasas gets, when we incorporated, we got 3.4% of the property tax. So all this lovely housing we have, 3.4% comes to us. Compared to LA or Redondo Beach, which is 28%, it's nothing. So if you build a lot of housing, affordable or not, this city doesn't earn enough to keep that money in our place. It goes to the state of California or the county of LA. Good luck. So we're dependent on sales tax. So if we impact our business community by saying that we're going to convert this retail or that commercial, it's going to impact our sales tax revenue. So the model is quite complex. A couple of other things. Parking in a suburban environment is very different than parking in an urban environment. Just try to park in Warner Center compared to Calabasas, where there isn't a parking meter. Well, we issue tickets for parking, and we contract for that service, but that's an issue that needs to be considered in a suburban environment, because parking is basically a spatial circumstance. And just like we don't have a business license fee in Calabasas, by design, we don't have really a parking meter policy where we make revenue off of our parking. We actually pay for parking enforcement, and that comes out of our general fund budget. So it's very different than saying, well, if we're going to convert that space and take away 10 parking spaces out of an inventory in a strip mall of 40 units, then do we have to replace it? Or is that actually a smart conversion where you don't worry about it because we have plenty of street parking here? So there's a lot of interesting things to explore there. And one of the pet projects I have, and I'm trying to get the facts on what's possible. can we in fact work with our sister cities, Hidden Hills, Agoura Hills, Westlake Village, LA County, the school district, water district, and have a special housing district? Not a housing finance district, but a housing district of some kind. Or can we get a law passed that allows us to do that so that we can meet our target of 200 affordable or workforce housing units and so forth? So
I'm sure Hidden Hills would like that because they
Well,
don't
and
have the space.
if we can share the burden, sometimes they have a big housing affordability fund, and so do we and others, and the developers, they want to come and take that money and get a discount on putting housing in our place. It's all worthy, because we did that on the Canyon Creek properties, and it was a big success. There's not an unhappy person there.
No, there's a
Yeah,
waiting
that's in
list.
Old Town on Cannon, just next door to LA. Anyway, I'd say that the Resource Conservation District, the Water District, the School District, Fire Protection District, particularly if it's wildfire protection that we're now aiming for, all those districts can help us deal with actually housing development and implementation, because we can make sure that they're water safe and, fire safe and so forth along the way. And there are technologies that allow us to do that, and some of those districts are actually right capable of making that happen. And you've heard me blabbing about 69 Cobra, the firefighting station up in Topanga. We should have those all up and down the mountains, so we can actually have some choices on the technology of building a house here, or an affordable living unit, whatever we call it. And the last thing is, I think that we should be focused on kind of a discretionary approach, where that, in Roberto's approach, he talks about the discretionary issues that you face, meaning do we have to bring it to the Planning Commission every time to do a major decision, or can we count on our terrific staff to say, hey, that fits, and that fits the housing district or the fire district or the parking district issues that we face, and it saves time and money when you actually get down to dealing with the complex of dealing with building 353 units of housing in the next 6 years, or whatever that is. And other than that, we have learned from others, and thank you, Roberto, for that, because that experience is now in our toolkit, which is grateful from my part. We're grateful for it from my point of view. But I think that what we need to do is go on a significant research and development activity to deal with how we manage the housing that we must build to meet our state requirements, and how we also recognize that we want to maintain that number one enviable quality of life community reputation. And guess what? That's why people want to come here. They want to build in our town because it's a great place to live. And we figure out how to solve a lot of the problems that you don't get solved, when you're dealing with, 5,000 homeless people on the street downtown LA or something like that. And it makes you think about the humanity of dealing with some of the issues of people who are so-called experiencing homelessness. But it's really, you got to provide shelter, and you got to have, water, energy, atmosphere, land, technology, and habitat for not just the lions and the critters in our mountains, but for the people that live here in Calabasas, and the 101 corridor for that matter, which is the busiest freeway on the planet. We have to build in that environment as well. So that's why I said maybe someone else should talk before I did. But
no, that's fine.
those are my
Dennis.
remarks.
Thank you so much. John, do you have any questions or comments?
Just briefly, Roberto, thank you for your presentation. You seem to be impressed with the City of Los Angeles's fairly progressive moves in connection with adaptive reuse ordinances, if I understood you. And my question is, there are 80, Dennis knows this, 80 plus cities in the county of Los Angeles. How are other cities doing in terms of being progressive in adopting these reuse ordinances?
We've met with the county, so the unincorporated area, and they're introduced in interested in introducing their own adaptive reuse ordinance. We understand City of Santa Monica has it on their legislation to explore that. They haven't really moved too far. City of Pasadena is pretty excited, and they want to move pretty fast, and we say fast. We'll see something maybe in 2025. So those are ones that are moving. City of Long Beach has their own adaptive reuse ordinance. City of Santa Ana has their own adaptive reuse ordinance. We've seen state bills introduced that they're looking at, introducing a statewide adaptive reuse ordinance, but I question that. I do think that it all needs to come at the community level, right? There can't be an adaptive reuse program that fits all. Every adaptive reuse program really needs to get input from the community and set a priorities. So that's just to name a few. Does that answer your question, John?
I'm just curious, why do you think Los Angeles is so progressive in this area? Just has more opportunities because of so many old buildings that could be reused in this manner?
Yes, that's part of it. We are so progressive in that we've had this adaptive reuse ordinance since 1999. So we've had over 24 years of experience with it. We are becoming more progressive in the sense that we're expanding it citywide. It had been only isolated to downtown Los Angeles. When it was first introduced, expand to Hollywood and Koreatown. So that's part of the history. So yeah, it's progressive in the sense that, well, first, that to my knowledge, as far as 1999, it's progressive in that they're recrafting it to provide, once again, more incentives to encourage the reuse of existing buildings.
Yeah, I was just thinking that it's going to take a lot of creative thought to come up with a model that works in Calabasas, given that our buildings are, as Dennis pointed out, mostly low-rise, mostly younger relative to other cities in Los Angeles. And so figuring out where this concept works in a newer city like Calabasas is a different model than Pasadena, Santa Monica, Long Beach, Los Angeles. But I'm not saying it's not doable. It is doable, but it really is going to require a lot of imagination, I think.
Yeah, and because it's a tool, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will be used, right? It's what we hope is that because you have the tool, the incentive is that a developer will be like, oh, there is this adaptive reuse program incentive. Let me take a look at it. Does it make economic sense, et cetera, et cetera? And it might not. Not every building deserves or can be reused for many reasons, and I stated a few of them, to be converted to new uses. But it's really, we're just trying to, we hope that there's incentives out there that discussion starts to occur, that they start running, financial analysis to see if it makes sense. And that's right. It's the goal is ultimately, can we reduce the impact associated with the construction industry? I've read that, the construction industry accounts for up to 48% of our greenhouse gases. All of the moving trucks that are associated with moving goods, and those goods, come from all over the country. It's not like they're all manufactured locally to build a unit. So those are when we talk about the total carbon that goes into the construction industry and the embodied carbon that already exists because so much energy went into the creation. That's all we would hope to see is just a conversation occur.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bob?
Yes. Excuse me. Just a few thoughts and a few rhetorical questions. Evaluating a building or a strip mall without a location is impossible. Is it the intention that the converted buildings be financially viable on their own? What rate do you envision the apartments go for? Low, medium, market? Families with children, where are the children supposed to play? To me, removal of local control is a recipe for disaster a tool, no matter how good it might be on its own, in the wrong hands can be very destructive.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Roberto, for your presentation. I just have questions, some for you, staff, and for Epi. And I guess just following your presentation, this first one is, can a city override leases? Can we legislate provisions concerning termination of leases or in consolidating leaseholds physically? I'm imagining, Roberto was speaking about different spaces in a building that are occupied, but a lot of it's empty.
I mean, I don't want to get too into the weeds or too into hypotheticals, but there are serious contracts clause issues, in the federal constitution and as well as the California Constitution that might prevent us from interfering too much.
I wanted to know. Okay, for the staff, we already have a mixed-use overlay zone, I believe, right, which would allow residential in office buildings, for example. Do we have to relax zoning codes for that? Roberto mentioned like setbacks in yards and things like that.
You are correct. We do have a mixed-use zoning district, and that does allow for this mix of whether it's retail or office plus residential units. That's completely allowed within the mixed-use zoning district. What we would have to look at from a zoning standpoint is there are certain requirements within the multifamily and mixed-use zone that when you have residential units, you have to accommodate like private outdoor space, like a balcony or a courtyard, or you have to provide a certain amount of community space. That may not be feasible in every existing commercial building. So those are the type of things that we would want to look at. What could be in conflict with allowing an existing building to be converted to residential? And it may not be 100% residential, to the point that's been brought up tonight. Maybe a conversion looks at an 80% conversion, so that you maintain ground floor for commercial uses, so that we maintain that active, vibrant community that Roberto was talking about. And I also like what Roberto brought up, which is to think about the fact that this is just another tool in the toolbox. It's not the only solution, but it's something that could be a very viable tool to provide a new housing opportunity at a lower environmental impact.
Well, would we need adaptive reuse if we already have the mixed-use overlay zone?
There would be a couple things to consider, which was brought up tonight, which is, number one, what zoning issues would conflict with converting an existing building? So again, parking, outdoor space, amenity space, even something as simple as a requirement that you can't be more than a certain distance from a trash enclosure. It might not be possible to do that in an existing office building. So we would have to take a look at those conflicts. Then there's also the question of incentives. The city, as was pointed out, we may not have much from a financial incentive, but if through an adaptive reuse ordinance, it establishes a by right process that reduces the risk and uncertainty, then that might be an incentive and also help with the financial viability of someone looking at
are you
reusing a
planning
building.
to create an adaptive reuse ordinance?
It's in our housing element to develop an adaptive reuse ordinance. So that's why I wanted the commission to hear this presentation tonight, because it is something that staff is going to have to start working on, and then we'll bring that back forward to the commission.
Okay, and I've got a couple of questions for Roberto. I was looking at the photo or the design of the strip mall, and with the windows in the front and the back, which looked like they were mostly one bedroom, but I assume you can combine them and have a two bedroom, right? And then but my question is, can you have bedrooms with no operating windows? I'm not even sure that's permitted here.
That would be something that I asked Michael to look into. If there's an existing local override of the California Building Code. So through our research, we understand that bedrooms have alternatives and don't necessarily need to provide natural light, natural ventilation. They can provide mechanical ventilation, artificial light. While we don't encourage that, we would encourage, as in the case study examples, indirect natural light to buildings. So through our understanding, state codes, building codes allow for that. We have yet to come to a code that precludes that at a state level. Once again, there might be some sort of city ordinance that overrides that state
All right.
building code.
I mean, I'd sort of be
and
uncomfortable
we
with
don't
that.
have any local amendments that would override the state building code from that standpoint, but that is the other component of adaptive reuse, is also looking at the building code and whether or not we have to accommodate some sort of flexibility with that building code to, again, repurpose
Okay.
a building.
I mean, I could see if it was on the top floor to allow opening skylights or something for interior rooms, but I'm not real comfortable with just clear-story windows. But anyway, what do you, Roberto, what do you suggest for buildings that we have? As Dennis said, we have a lot of low-rise buildings, 2-3 stories, that are offices. They don't have retail, or very little retail. What would you? It's a little different environment. It's not a downtown with a lot of people and a lot of stores. It's a suburban office park. What would you do with that?
Well, that's where I was trying, to say that there is just this value and amenity with having walkability. So yes, some neighborhoods are more used to getting in their car and getting around in order to get their goods. But there's going to be a value in which people were like, hey, I want to live in this unit because it has this walkability component to it. It does have ground floor retail amenities where I can go to a local coffee shop, or where I could go to a local, maybe even doctor's office or something, and reduce the amount of vehicle trips. I think, it can't be eliminated. That's just not how the community is currently set up. Or can there be a reduction? Would people want to, pay market rate to live in those type of units? And we believe, that there is a market appetite for increased walkability.
Okay. Does anybody else have any comments or questions for Roberto or this presentation? No?
I have some more.
Oh, go ahead.
Since we're throwing things into the hopper, one of the other concerns I have has to do with specialty kinds of housing needs. I would bet in Calabasas we have a lot of single parents, particularly single women parents, who come here for the school district and for the public safety and for all the other things if they can afford it. And again, housing affordability is what we're trying to achieve here in a lot of ways. So I think that needs to be considered. And I just visited our Congresswoman, who is probably the foremost representative in the House of Representatives dealing with veterans and disabled American veterans and women vets and disabled women vets, who oftentimes deal with a great deal of discrimination and have a very difficult time finding housing in a place like this. But if 200 units of our property, our housing burden have to be done in the next 5 or 6 years, it needs to address the kind of market that's out there as well, because those folks want to come here and enjoy the enviable community lifestyle that we have, and it needs to be affordable in some way, and it needs to be distributed. It also needs to deal with the disabled American veterans that are entitled to a little special consideration in our community as well as anywhere else. We have a lovely monument in the back of our city hall here that honors the vets, and we have actually quite a few vets. We even had a 95-year-old World War II vet that was at our last Veterans Day ceremony. So it's the kind of thing where those people can afford to live here maybe, but what about the future? We have a lot of the wars that we've been fighting in Iraq and Syria and Ukraine and everywhere else these days, and those folks are going to need to have choices that are respectful of their sacrifices or their needs. And ultimately, we have a really very clever community transportation system here, because we have dial-a-ride, we have access, and we have our own bus line. And it's actually a scheduled bus line because it moves our students, and particularly those maybe single moms and dads that need to have their students taken care of And we even have a preschool that, you know, encourages people to have, you know, to live in this community as well. So those all have to be built into the plans that Michael and his staff are working on as we speak. And this has been actually a very welcome presentation, Roberto. Thank you very much for that. But I'm hoping that those issues can be addressed. And the last thing I want to talk about is, well, there's two things. Operations and maintenance of housing are a significant part of what our staff does. We have a code enforcement department. We are very high standard in terms of the way people treat their property and their neighbors and the way they deal with stuff. And housing should be built with that in mind and with the market and the users of that, you know, in mind as well. And then ultimately, we have a big insurance problem, and not just in our community, but throughout the state of California, and particularly because of the wildfires that we've experienced. And we have insurance companies like State Farm and Allstate that aren't writing new insurance on homes. You can get earthquake insurance through Fair Plan, but I'm going to guess within 5 years we're going to have a Fair Plan for home insurance. And right now we're collecting about $750 million a year. Seems like a pittance to me, but that's how much is being collected under the Fair Plan funding program for earthquake. And if you start adding fire and other kinds of disturbances to that, it's going to make a major strain on California's insurance system as well. And we should be thinking about that for all of us who live here now, because if you haven't been underwritten in the past by either Allstate or State Farm, and probably other insurance companies are raising their rates to deal with the liability of all that, sometimes doubling and tripling of your annual cost for, you know, home insurance. That has to be factored in, at the very least, in housing construction. And if it's rental housing, that's going to make a very significant issue when it comes to dealing with the actual penciling out of a development's, financial circumstances. Even though we can't, as a planning commission or the city, we can't address the financial consequences of the private housing sector. So all that needs to be factored in my opinion, as we continue this research. And again, thanks to Roberto and to Michael for making this happen tonight. And I hope I haven't overstayed my welcome.
No, thanks, Dennis. Unless there's anything else on this item, can we take a very short break before we do the public hearing? Just like 5 minutes? All right, thanks. Okay. All right, welcome back. We're now on a public hearing item, file number SPR-2022-013, SCP-2022-002, and OTP-2022.
Your microphone's not on, Michael.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're back. Sorry about that. So we're back after the break, and we're on a public hearing item number 4. It's file site plan review 2022-013, scenic corridor permit 2022-002, and oak tree permit 2023-009 for regarding a 2-story, 1,512 square foot addition at the rear of an existing 2-story single-family residence located at 24325 Mulholland Highway within the Hillside Mountainous HM zoning district and the scenic corridor overlay zone. We've got the applicant, the project manager, Dina El-Kanawi. Did I say it okay? Yeah, okay, and the architect, Jeff Troyer, are here. We did have Mrs. Rebecca Nurek, and her 3 children. They're the owners of the property. Do you want, is there a presentation, or do you want me to just open the, oh, okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Dave.
Thank you, Chair Harrison. And good evening, Commissioners. First, I want to mention that this project was noticed to all property owners within 500 feet of the subject site. The public hearing notice was also posted on the city's website and throughout the city at all required locations. Story poles were also installed 4 weeks ahead of the hearing due to the addition being within a scenic corridor, and staff has not received any public correspondence regarding the project.
feedback.
Maybe are all the mics off?
Done.
Is that better? Can you hear me better now?
We were getting the feedback.
Oh, okay.
I'm not hearing it now. Computer?
Got it. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so here you can see the project site outlined in green. It's located off of Mulholland Highway within the Hillside Mountainous Zoning District and the Scenic Corridor Overlay Zone. To the east, we have the Mountain Park HOA. If you can see my cursor. There we go. We have the Mountain Park HOA to the east, and to the west are additional homes located off of Dry Canyon Cold Creek. To the south are single-family residences, and to the north is a vacant HM-zoned parcel. So the project site again is outlined in green here. It's a 1.1 acre lot. The site is currently developed with an existing 2-story single-family residence of approximately 3,147 square feet, as well as exterior improvements such as an attached garage, landscape, hardscape, and a pool. So here are photographs of the subject site. You can see in this bottom photo here, this is what the site looks like when viewed from Mulholland Highway facing west. There is an existing landscaped berm that serves to screen much of the existing residents from view of Mulholland Highway. And so then these top 2 photos are taken from on-site. This photo on the left is from inside the property's front gates facing the front of the residence looking south. And then this photo of the rear of the residence is looking to the northeast. And in this top right photo, you can see the area of addition to the right of that existing building. So the project proposal includes construction of a 1,512 square foot 2-story addition to an existing 2-story single-family residence. The project also includes encroachment into the protected zone of oak trees for construction of the addition and associated new site features, which includes landscape, hardscape, a fire pit, and walls. In Calabasas Municipal Code Section 17.62.020, Section 17.32.010, and Section 17.62.050 require this project to be reviewed by the Planning Commission. Okay, so here we have an existing site plan. You can see if you can see my cursor, the existing 2-story residence located here, as well as the existing improvements that surround the residence. Much of the site is existing to remain, but as you can see, there are some palm trees that are proposed to be removed here. And then this is the area of work in the rear yard. There's an existing patio cover that's going to be demolished, as well as this existing planter area. It's going to be removed to accommodate the new addition, and the decking around the pool is proposed to be removed. Okay, and here on the proposed site plan, you can see the area of the addition shown in yellow here. I'd like to mention it does meet all required development standards, and I want to note that in regards to pervious surfaces, the residence was constructed prior to the city's incorporation, and it is considered legal non-conforming in regards to pervious surfaces. For the Hillside Mountainous Zoning District, the minimum pervious percentage is 86%, and they are non-conforming. But with the proposed project, they are reducing the hardscape around the pool, so they're actually improving that existing non-conformity rather than making it worse with the proposed project. You can also see on the site plan the new exterior improvements proposed. So we have a new trellis area here, an extension of this existing patio, a DG pathways, staircase, fire pit, new deck around the pool, and some new landscaping in these areas. Here we have the proposed first floor plan. As you can see outlined in yellow, the area of the addition is going to include a game room / cabana, as well as a bathroom, steam room, sauna, and then a bar area over here. Here we have the proposed second floor plan shown in yellow, and the extent of the interior remodel is just to accommodate the changes in the floor plan to access this new area of addition. And the addition on the second floor is to be used as a primary suite. So we have bedroom, walk-in closet, bathroom, and balcony. Here we have the proposed elevations, and those blue boxes show the areas of addition. So on this first elevation here, the garage is existing, and then behind it, you'll see this additional roof line back there. So that is the new area of two-story addition that you can see from the front of the house. And then at this lower elevation here, the east elevation, shown in blue, this is the area of two-story addition, and this is the area of the existing two-story residence. The proposed project does include a re-roof for the existing residence, so you can see that this roof is new, but it is to remain a Spanish-style roof, same as the existing residence has. And the project also involves new railings for the existing portion of the residence as well. And same thing on this slide. From this elevation, you can see the area of new two-story addition here outlined in blue. And from this elevation, the new outdoor fireplace, and then the two-story portion of the residence. Here we have just a colors and materials board. You can see that the stucco color will be a off-white color, and then we have a brown trim, sandstone detail for the fireplace, wrought iron railings, brown siding, and then a black steel trellis. And then this is information on the Spanish tile roof that's proposed. So the project is located on a fully developed site already, but it does involve some new areas of landscaping around the addition. So you can see these areas that are faintly green here. These are some new landscaped areas. So those are some new planters. And we have some new hedges around the new hardscape at the pool area. And also some new trees in these planter boxes as well. So we have proposed some olive trees and Meyer lemon trees. Okay, and then in regards to oak trees, the project involves encroachment into the protected zone of 2 oak trees. There are 19 oak trees on site and 3 that are located in the public right-of-way. So 22 trees in total were analyzed as part of the arborist's report. All 22 trees will be preserved in place. Out of those 2 trees that will be encroached upon, you can see them in yellow here, tree numbers 14 and 15. Only one of those trees that's going to be encroached upon is likely to be impacted at all, and that impact is expected to be minimal. As outlined in the arborist's report submitted by the applicant, there is already improvements within the protected zone of both of those trees. So a portion of the replacement decking and wall footings that are within that protected zone will be designed in a way to minimize impact to the tree's roots. The city's consulting arborist also reviewed the applicant's submitted report and was in agreement with the fact that construction activities are not likely to cause any long-term adverse impact to the trees. And so the city's consulting arborist recommended approval of the oak tree permit with associated mitigation measures. So here you can see a photo of the story poles that were installed at the subject site. Story poles are required for this project because of the fact that it's an addition greater than 500 feet within the scenic corridor. You can see in this photo here the view from Mulholland Highway. As mentioned in the previous slides, much of the existing residence is screened from view on Mulholland due to that landscaped berm. So this photo was taken to the north of the site along Mulholland, facing south, looking at the residence through the side yard. And you can see through that red circle, we have the story poles in the background behind the existing residence. And so this next view on the right-hand side is the view of the story poles from the rear yard of the site. So on their property, looking at the story poles at the rear of the house.
Jacqueline, before you go on, could I ask you a quick question? On the slide here to the left with the red circle, the palm trees that are within that territory, are they staying? Do we know?
I'm not positive. I believe if I go back to the...
Well, I'll ask when you come up to the mic. It's okay.
Okay. Can
Thanks.
we go back to that question then?
Pardon?
Can we go back to that question
Yeah, please.
when he comes
Just
up then?
continue.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the architecture review panel reviewed the proposed project on April 28th, 2023. The subject site is located within a designated scenic corridor, and the proposed project maintains the same architectural style that the existing residence has. The architecture review panel found that the proposed project is compatible with the aesthetics of the surrounding neighborhood and recommended approval of the project as proposed to the Planning Commission. So home sizes in the vicinity range from 3,217 square feet to 5,278 square feet. Lot sizes in the vicinity range from approximately 32,702 square feet to 76,440 square feet. The average home size in the vicinity is 4,044 square feet, and the average lot size is 58,755 square feet. So with the proposed project, the residence will be 4,779 square feet in total, which is within the range of home sizes in the vicinity, and the lot size is 48,299 square feet. And surrounding homes are a mix of 1- and 2-story single-family residences. So moving on to the applicable findings, there are 6 findings required for a site plan review under section 17.62.020 of the Calabasas Municipal Code. Number 1, the proposed project complies with all applicable provisions of this development code. Number 2, the project is consistent with the general plan, any applicable specific plan, and any special design theme adopted by the city for the site in the vicinity. 3, the approval of the site plan review is in compliance with the California Environmental Quality Act. 4, the proposed structures, signs, site development, grading, and/or landscaping are compatible in design, appearance, and scale with existing uses, development, signs, structures, and landscaping for the surroundings. 5, the site is adequate in size and shape to accommodate the proposed structures, yards, walls, fences, parking, landscaping, and other development features. And lastly, the proposed project is designed to respect and integrate with the existing surrounding natural environment to the maximum extent feasible. The project also involves a request for a scenic corridor permit, and there are 4 required findings for a scenic corridor permit under section 17.62.050. Number 1, the proposed project design complies with the scenic corridor development guidelines adopted by the council. Number 2, the proposed project incorporates design measures to ensure maximum compatibility and enhancement of the scenic corridor. Number 3, the proposed project is within an urban scenic corridor designated by the general plan and includes adequate design and landscaping which serve to enhance and beautify the scenic corridor. And number 4, the proposed structures, signs, site development, grading, and/or landscaping related to the proposed use is compatible in design, appearance, and scale with existing uses, development, sign, structures, and landscaping of the surrounding area. And then lastly, an oak tree permit is also involved in the proposed project. There are multiple potential findings for an oak tree permit, but under section 17.32.010, only one of those findings needs to be made in order to approve the project. So this is the most relevant finding to this project. The request to alter or encroach within the protected zone of an oak tree or scrub oak habitat is warranted to enable reasonable and conforming use of the property, which would otherwise be prevented by the presence of the oak tree or scrub oak habitat. In addition, such alterations and encroachments can be performed without significant long-term adverse impact to the oak tree or scrub oak habitat. Reasonable use of the property shall be determined in accordance with these guidelines. And the applicant's proposed justification for the site plan review, scenic corridor permit, and oak tree permit findings are attached as Exhibit B to the written staff report. So with that, staff concludes that the proposed project will not alter the existing use of the subject site, which is an allowed use in the HM zoning district. Compliance with the applicable development standards is documented within the written staff report. No variance permit is required for the proposed project. Homes in the neighborhood range in size from 3,217 square feet to 5,278 square feet. With the proposed addition, the residence will be 4,779 square feet. The architecture review panel recommended approval of the project, and the project is exempt from SEQA review pursuant to section 15061, subsection B3, general rule exemption, and section 15301, existing facilities of the California SEQA guidelines. So staff recommends that first the commission conduct the public hearing, and second that the commission direct staff to prepare for consideration at the next commission meeting a resolution for approval or resolution for denial of file number SPR-2022-012, SCP-2022-002, and OTP-2023-009, inclusive of all required findings to support the resolution. Staff is prepared to assist the commission in developing the findings for approval or denial as required. Thank you, and I'm available for questions. And I want to mention we also have the applicant and the architect here tonight to answer questions as well.
Thanks so much, Jacqueline, and a good report. can we just open the public hearing then? And if there are any questions, and also, I don't know if the applicant or the architect wish to speak or just stand there and, because we have some comments and questions perhaps.
Before you open the public hearing,
Yes.
I have a quick question of
Oh.
Jacqueline. Have you heard from any of the neighbors regarding this project?
We did not receive any correspondence, no.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. Okay, so we'll open it, and do either of you wish to speak, or you just want to answer questions? I have. Okay, so let's start with questions then, or comments, or, oh, okay, you started that, but go ahead, Randy.
That's fine. No, I
with me.
I think it was, thank you for the presentation. It was complete and pretty clear cut to me, so I don't have any questions.
Thank you. John?
I'd like to ask the applicant to come to the podium.
And please state your name and your city of residence.
Dean Al-Kinawi. Is it on? How do I turn it on? Is it on? Oh.
Yes, thank you for being
Dina
here.
Al-Kinawi. Do I need to spell it?
No, just- where's your
Redondo
residence?
Beach. Redondo Beach.
So I was looking at the landscape plan, and first of all, I want to commend you for getting rid of, I think someone's going to address the question of what palm trees are going to remain, if any, but it looks like a lot of them are going, which I personally applaud, but that's a personal preference. I did notice in the planning schedule, this is on L1.1, the landscape plan, which says the new stuff that's going in, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't see any of those 7 plantings or the 2 trees as California natives. And I'm curious as to whether or not you know whether you looked into California native plants, trees, shrubs, ground covers versus what is being selected.
I would like to defer the question to the architects. Would you be able
Okay.
to come up, Jeff?
I'm Jeff Troyer, the architect.
And your city of residence?
Sherman Oaks.
Okay. So do you know the answer to my question?
I do. I always try to go for natives first. It was more a response of what my clients were looking for. And we are removing every palm tree.
Removing every palm tree?
Yes.
Oh, okay, that was in response to Commissioner Washburn's earlier question.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're sort of promoting natives, but they thought this stuff was more in keeping with their existing landscape?
They really wanted to go more Mediterranean.
More Mediterranean.
So we're focusing on drought tolerant.
Okay. Oh, I know, I had another question, this is just out of curiosity. There are a lot of oak trees on this property. Do you know whether they are natural or were they planted by prior owners, some of them? Some look pretty small.
I don't know exactly. I know there are a lot of scrub oaks around the perimeter that I
Yeah.
believe have grown naturally.
But I really love the fact that this has a lot of natural landscaping from the oaks. And some of the oaks are heritage, so they've been there a long time, like 14 and 15.
Yeah.
But then there are a lot of coast live oaks and some, as you said, scrub oaks that look pretty small, which suggests to me that that they've been there more recently. And it sort of looked like somebody might have planted them. But you don't know. If you don't know, that's fine.
My guess would be that they were not planted just because of the kind of random nature of where they are.
I see. There's just so much more foliage on this property than the neighbors.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous piece of property.
From the aerial, yeah. And just one thing on the oak tree findings, this is Exhibit B. I don't know who prepared this. There's a comment that the property owners request a permit to alter Coast Live Oak number 14. We're really not altering number 14. It's being impacted. Its protected zone is being impacted, but I just want to make sure there's nothing in the oak tree report that suggests it's being trimmed or
No, not
moved
at all.
or anything. So alter, I know that's a term of art in our findings. That's probably why it's in here, but I just wanted to confirm there's no alteration by the owner's plan.
You're right.
Okay. All right, that's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Bob?
Yes, I have a question for Jacqueline. On the staff report, page 3D, I'm talking about the pervious services.
I'm sorry, Vice Chair Leah, would you be able to turn on your microphone? I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Staff report D, I'm talking about the pervious surface. It's 75, the minimum is 86, so this, as a result, they're going up to 76. Why not up to 83?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yes, you state that the pervious surface is 75%, it's required 86, so as a result, they're going up to 76. It doesn't compute for me. Can you explain?
So their existing percentage is 75, and because the residence was constructed in 1977, that was prior to the city's incorporation, so their pervious surface percentage is considered legal non-conforming.
Then the increase to 76 was just incidental.
Right, right.
Okay,
There's no
what I
minimum
wanted
that you would need to
clarify.
increase to. You would just not be able to make that existing nonconformity any worse.
Thank you.
No, I
No
think it's
other
good that they
question.
actually increased it, even
Yeah.
though they didn't have to. Dennis?
Wendy?
She didn't have any.
Okay. Just a couple of things. I think I heard you say that the palms are going to go, right?
That's correct.
It's actually, just so everybody kind of gets a sense of it, I'm sure you guys took the recommendations of the arborist as well, but palm trees, unfortunately, are invasive species, and they are also very flashy in a fire. During the Woolsey, we had, the tops of the palm trees blowing across the 101 freeway from north of the freeway, size of a Volkswagen on fire. So it's a good safety move. And the oak trees, even though they do get burned, meaning the leaves get damaged if there's a wildfire going through, they recover, which is kind of interesting, unless they're diseased or something's wrong with them. And I'm guessing that as you maintain or develop the landscape plan, ultimately, that you're also going to remove dead wood from the oaks and so forth. That'll actually improve your fire resistance and the fire recovery as well. So I think that's a really good thing. I have no complaints. I'm just saying that it's important to know. And the last thing is that you can get help from the Resource Conservation District. They're located now on Las Virgenes Road, right across from, actually behind La Paz Restaurant. And also EPIC here in Calabasas, our environmental protection in Calabasas. I think that's the proper title. I'm not sure, but it's an outgrowth of some of the folks that are on our Public Safety Commission, and they do free inspections. And you're not required to do anything, but they provide really good advice in dealing with, the proper maintenance of the entire landscaping environment. You may have already taken advantage of that. I'm not sure, but
Not yet, that's good to know.
it's. I'm sure you can get the reference from our staff, and they'll come out and take a look and give you recommendations of what to do, and it might even save you some money on kinds of plantings, because ultimately, the fire department here is going to be doing inspections of all of our properties, and you want to make sure that you don't have a lot of unexpected expense in dealing with the removal of stuff that's around the house and so forth. So we just discovered a thing up in Northern California, redwood bark that's shredded. It doesn't flash like the wood chips or some of the other ground covers that you can buy and put on place. It'll basically stop embers and also put out the flashiness or the fire that comes from a wind-blown fire front that comes through our places like this. Last thing I would alert you to is that we have been dealing with a number of bark and boring beetles in pines and oaks, and almost every kind of tree. There's the Conservation District has recommendations also on how to deal with the preservation of your trees as well. So looks like beautiful design, and it'd be great to make sure that you don't spend any more money than you have to, and that you're protecting the property for your naturalization of the place. One last thing, and that is that if you look at the property map And the project location map shows the edge of your property, or the property of the owner, is literally catty corner to city-owned property, because the property that's literally on Dry Canyon Coal Creek, right at the S-curves there coming out of the area that's developed behind the gate in Calabasas Park, that triangular wedge that kind of looks like a right angle toward this, Dry Canyon Coal Creek, that actually is city property. So you have the actual added protection of the city maintaining that property as not parkland, but as city-owned land, that we have a number of parcels in the city. So we're your neighbors.
That's where the loud pickleball courts are going in, right?
No, I don't think so. No, it's very hilly. It's really the downslope from Dry Canyon Coal Creek Road to the northwesterly corner of your or the owner's property. So, nice design and well thought out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, I think the pickleball courts are going in near me at the golf course. I have a couple of questions for you, Jeff. The wooden trellis upstairs, that's over the, I guess,
bedroom?
yes. Is that going to be treated for fire?
It will, yeah.
Because it touches this exterior of the home, so just want to make sure.
Yeah. It will.
And then I noticed on page A12 and also Jacqueline mentioned that there's going to be a new fireplace outside and also a new fire pit. So my question is there really a need for two focal points? As I mentioned in a previous application, I'm concerned about fire pits because they're just open fires. And I'm just wondering what environmentally conscious customers are doing as alternatives. Are they putting in fountains, lights, topiary or bonsai or what are they doing? Because that's just fossil fuels burning, and it's not, some cities have banned open fires altogether. So I was just wondering if there's an alternative to the fire pit.
Well, the fireplace that's near the outdoor dining area would be wood burning, but the fire pit, they don't plan on burning wood out there. I think it would just be like those canisters, just some kind of flame.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you. What?
They would be they weren't planning on burning wood at the fire pit. They would be those canisters. I'm not sure what kind of gas it is, but it's a flame, but it's not like you're not burning actually.
Right. I mean, so there's two issues to me. I mean, I just wonder what.
If I may jump in, those are also accessory structures. So while they are on this plan because they're just part of the overall scope, anyone can come in and almost over the counter get a permit for.
Right. I'm just asking what environmentally conscious people are doing as an alternative to fire pits, which really are just fossil fuels in one form or another in an open pit fires. It's like, this is not a good idea for environmentally. And I'm just wondering if you've seen, you're an architect, what are people doing? Are they still just doing fire pits without thinking about it or something? Is that it?
I personally don't encourage burning wood in a fire pit outside. I think it's foolish.
But even the other one is a fossil fuel. So anyway, I guess hopefully someday there will be an alternative. I understand a fireplace, that's different, but just a fire pit, it's we are in a fire area and it is a fossil fuel, so it contributes to climate change and fires possibly. All right, I have comments, but I don't know if everybody, did everybody already make comments? Maybe they did, so I have a couple. I think this is just
it sounds like that might be the deliberation, so if we don't have any more questions, maybe we'll close public comment.
Oh, okay. If we don't have, yes. All right, so we can close the public hearing, and now we'll just make comments. But thank you.
You're welcome.
I think everything looks great. I mean, I wish all of our
You want to close
applications.
the public hearing?
Oh, yeah, I thought I closed it.
You did.
Okay. I mean, I think, I wish other applications looked like this. The attention to detail with conforming and integrating all the elements of design of the house into the addition is just, is wonderful. I mean, the roof, the colors, the materials, the trellises, just everything. So I really appreciate the work you've done. As I said earlier, I wish you were on our architectural review panel, or could get people advice, because we've had projects with no architect, and it's like night and day difference. And your architecture isn't just, you're a high, this is a high caliber as far as I can see, because we also had a pool house addition in one community, which wasn't even a pool house, didn't even have a shower in it. So your cabana and your high-end bathroom, I mean, that's really a good design also. I really can't say enough about how good this is to me. I also, on the Oak report personally, I think it's a good report, and I would choose finding number 2 that I think Jacqueline mentioned on page 5, because we have to choose one of those findings. But that's my thought anyway. Does anybody else want to make comments?
I'm prepared to make a motion if there are no other comments.
Go ahead.
All right. I move that we direct staff to prepare a resolution for approval of file number SPR 2022-012, SCP 2022-002, and OTP 2023-009.
I'll second the motion.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Well,
Aye.
hold on.
Aye.
Sorry, I think we should get clarity on which finding the commission wants staff to,
Oh, I suggested 2, but I don't know.
Well,
if I
that,
do.
could also,
incorporate that, yeah.
could we do findings 1 and 2? I mean, you can do more than one finding, or you can let staff
Well, I don't think they're
reevaluate.
removing one.
Finding number 1 is a request to remove.
Yeah, they're not removing.
Right, so then we should just do the finding
2.
that's relevant,
It's 2.
which may be number 2.
Right.
I think it's finding
I agree.
2.
Right,
Yeah.
two is the one for request to alter or encroach. So staff can develop a finding focused around number 2, which I believe is the same one the applicant included in their findings.
Yeah.
Yes,
I agree. And that is what I incorporate into my motion.
okay, yes. So is that understood? So, I'm sorry,
No, and Dennis seconded that?
yes.
Okay.
And we all approved.
I would suggest we vote on this motion with the updated clarification about
You want a roll
what
call?
the role findings are. No, you can just do a voice vote.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Great.
Thank you.
With the clarification. Thank you, Epi. Thank you very much, and seriously, thank you very much, and I wasn't kidding if you want to apply. Okay. We have a director's report next then?
Yes, thank you. I do just want to point out that the next meeting is September 21st, and we do have a public hearing item on that meeting. It's a conditional use permit for an expansion of an existing alcohol use at a property along Las Virgenes Road. So that'll come to the hearing notice has already been sent out, and that'll come to the Planning Commission in a couple weeks. I do want to mention that this is our last meeting with Epi, who's been with the city attorney's office for a number of years now. And although he kind of just joined coming to the Planning Commission more recently, he has been behind the scenes for quite a while and has gotten a lot of work done on behalf of the city or for the city. So I, for one, want to express my appreciation for all the hard work that Epi has done, and wish him good luck in his at the new firm that he's moving on to. And then finally, from a report standpoint, I want to mention that I have been speaking with the Mayor's Youth Council. The Mayor's Youth Council is made up of Calabasas high school students, and they meet once a month with the mayor and the mayor pro tem, and they talk about various civic issues. They help put together events throughout the city. I have spoken with both the mayor and the mayor pro tem about getting some of the Mayor's Youth Council members involved at the Planning Commission level. So we've made a request that the Mayor's Youth Council appoint maybe 1 or 2 liaisons from the council to start attending Planning Commission meetings. And hopefully we'll get some direction at their next meeting later. I think it's September 11th is their next meeting. And if we're successful, then the council will appoint 1 or 2 members of the Mayor's Youth Council to be a liaison so that they can come to the Planning Commission meetings and then also report back to their fellow youth council members. They won't have an official role on the Planning Commission, but I'm happy to let the liaison sit up here next to staff and have an interactive part of the process. So that's it from a report standpoint. The one thing on the agenda that I did want to bring up and discuss tonight was the method in which the staff has brought resolutions to the Planning Commission. As all of the members on the commission know, past practice up until about earlier this year was that for a project being moved forward to the Planning Commission consideration, that came with a recommendation from the Planning Department, and that recommendation would either be approval or denial, and that came in the form of a draft resolution that was provided to the Planning Commission in a packet. That resolution would effectively indicate staff's recommendation, a resolution for approval or a resolution for a denial, and it would include conditions as necessary. That's all effectively in draft form, and that was available for the Planning Commission's consideration at that meeting. Earlier this year, we made some changes to the process in which staff would bring reports to the Planning Commission, projects to the Planning Commission, and to take a more objective and neutral position. The staff report that comes to the Planning Commission is an overview and an analysis of the project, but no actual recommendation other than to get direction from the Planning Commission to bring back a resolution for approval or denial, and then take direction from there. Of course, that is a two-step approach. So as we saw tonight, there was a project that came to the Planning Commission about a month ago, and effectively that project was not approved until tonight because that's when that resolution was brought back to the commission for final action. So that's just that's how this process would work, or does work currently. But I did want to raise the question to the commission if this process is working for the commission, or do we want to have a discussion about changing the process? We can go back to how we were doing things before. But I just wanted to bring that up and see if there's a desire to look at how staff reports are brought to the Planning Commission.
21st. If I may?
Sure.
I personally would prefer to go back to the way it was done before. I think that there's an unnecessary delay in approval to projects. And as you mentioned with regard to the matter that came back to us today for approval, it was a month. And I don't think that is a particularly fair delay to the applicants. It seems that it's more a matter of concern with perception in terms of staff coming in with a recommendation for approval of a particular matter. And for perception to hold sway over consequences to the applicant and delay to the applicant, I don't think it's appropriate. That's my concern.
Anybody else have any comments about this?
I generally agree with Commissioner Fosberg. I preferred the older method, A, because we could get it done that night and move forward, number one. And number two, I appreciated the staff's recommendation as a thought point. I didn't give it undue weight, but I certainly was interested in its reasoning for why it was in support of or in opposition to, recognizing that the staff had spent an enormous amount of time working the project with the applicant. So I liked the old method. I am mindful of the reasons for the switch and putting the delay aside. Just from a merits point of view, I do understand that lots of cities do not make a recommendation, that their staff does keep it very neutral. So I think Tom Bartlett's commented that he, in a prior life, worked at a city that did it the way we're doing it now, and they obviously preferred that. So on balance, I agree with Wendy, and I would go back for the two reasons that I identified.
Do you want to go? Okay.
Yes, I like the new way. I think it works better. I think it's fairer. The old way, when we were disagreeing with staff, we find ourselves in an adversarial relationship. Without staff's recommendation, we can make our decisions without having to fight that battle.
Dennis?
Well, I'm a little ambivalent on it. I recognize the value of having the immediacy of making the decision after we've heard all the information at the time. But part of the reason we went this way was to deal with the controversy that might arise, and then instead of having to argue about what the continuance might be to another meeting or to another level of staff analysis, or frankly if it's going to be booted upstairs to make a decision at the council on maybe a policy or a discretionary issue. So I'm in agreement that it's good to have conclusion to a complicated case and presentation. When they get extremely complicated, like on the story pole business that we dealt with in previous episodes, literally, that caused city elections. And at this point, we're dealing with a couple of significant projects that are going to continue to be at least complex, if not controversial. So what kind of act does it take for us to go back to the old way, which is what Wendy and John are considering at this point?
I think it was the city council that ordered this.
No, it's entirely a policy decision at staff's level. So it's just a matter of us reverting one way or another. Technically, our ordinance under the municipal code, Title 17, requires or says that the planning department is to deliver a staff report to the planning commission recommending approval or denial of a project. So that would go back to really how our ordinance is written. I'd actually argue that if we continue down this route, we would have to look at amending that ordinance to be more in line with that. To the point that has been raised, which is, that is the main concern, which is when staff has a recommendation and prepares a resolution, in effect, because staff is making a recommendation one way or another, there is a perception of bias for or against the project. If there can be a general understanding that is not staff's intent is to provide the information and simply a recommendation, understanding that it is only that, a recommendation.
May I ask, if an applicant has a project and staff considers their application to be incomplete or believes that it is not appropriate for approval yet, it doesn't get to us, does it?
No, and that's typically why most applications take quite a while to come to the planning commission. There's usually multiple rounds of going back and forth with the applicant to ensure that at least all the objective development requirements are aligned. At some point, we may get to a point with an applicant where they're unwilling to budge on moving their addition or the project so that it complies with a setback requirement, or lower the height of something so that it complies with a height limit. At that point, we give the applicant two choices. We either proceed forward And frankly, staff will have a recommendation of denial because it doesn't meet that requirement. Or they can apply for a variance and then go through the variance process as well. And there's, again, that is entirely up to the discretion of the planning commission.
But that was true under the old
Yes.
process as well, correct?
Yes.
So, I mean, essentially, we're talking about form over substance, because if it's being brought to us, typically it's being brought with a recommendation for approval, whether it's stated or it's not stated. Again, I don't see the reason to saddle the applicants with delays, because we're choosing to follow form over substance.
And certainly, it is not our intent to be adversarial with any commission or council for that matter. Our role and our goal is to assist the commission as the final decision-making body. So, as I stated, a recommendation from the department is simply that. Now, we could, very subtle nuance, is just include a fleshed-out resolution as a draft, and then that, once again, makes it clear that it's not a final action on anyone's part. It's a draft that is subject to change by the planning commission.
Yeah, well, I mean, I, for one, have never found it to be adversarial. If staff is recommending approval, I don't think the commission, in my experience, the commission has never hesitated to send staff back to make some changes, to require some additional revisions. So I'm a little perplexed by the whole thing, quite
Well,
frankly.
Here's the problem. In the 1990s, when I was on the planning commission, the staff often made presentations without a recommendation. So that changed, and when I came on, a couple of years ago, they were always making recommendations. And it's not just perception, the staff has been actively campaigning for certain projects behind the scenes, because we've seen that in records requests. It isn't so simple that they just make a recommendation and it could go either way. They've been actively campaigning in things like West Village or Avalon. So I think we should keep it the same, the way it is now, because it's not been as innocent as you make it sound. The staff has actively campaigned against the planning commission and the city council on projects, and taken more than just a little recommendation, but a strong advocacy, and I think that's improper.
I suspect, Michael, you disagree with that.
Yeah, but the record speaks for itself. You can look at the records, the words are there, you can't deny them. So you had secret meetings with the housing department, for example, on trying to get them to interfere with fish and wildlife, and it's there in the record.
Chair Harrison.
Yeah, no, I don't.
But
So it's
does
not
that
just
have
perception.
any? I understand what you're talking about.
Not on things like
does
this,
that,
but on what Dennis was talking about, the larger
no matter
projects.
what it's on, what you're talking about has nothing to do with whether the project comes to us with a recommendation for approval, correct?
It does.
It's a separate, it's a separate set of
No, I
circumstances.
think it does. No, I think it does. I really do. I think they shouldn't make recommendations. I mean, if there was some way on projects like tonight's, that was easy, but there's some where they're making recommendations or they had made recommendations in the past that were against the will of the people of the city of Calabasas by a landslide, and they were making recommendations. And they were working behind the scenes too. So I think they should keep it the way it is. And of course staff is going to deny that, but the record speaks for itself. The words are out there. So,
Well,
the public records are out there.
Yeah, I disagree.
Well, a
Okay.
a recommendation by the city that is contrary to someone's perception of the will of the people is not necessarily incorrect.
So what's happening is, if you look at what's happening in the West Village case now and
Let's not mention any cases,
okay, but
especially
what
those
could
involved
happen
in
then
litigation.
is that the staff's recommendations are used against us in litigation. And that actually is happening. So that's the danger of making recommendations like that.
Is there a
It's coming
way,
back to bite us.
is there a way,
Right.
without staff making a recommendation for approval or denial, to nevertheless bring forward a proposed resolution should the commission choose to approve the project?
So that's a good point. If there's a way to bring along maybe one for and one against, and we could just adopt it then.
Well, the problem though is that really what the commission is doing is adopting a set of findings. And it would be either confusing or conflicting to bring forward two sets of findings, one for approval and one for denial. That would not be appropriate.
I would note that was in a previous, or a project which was contentious in the city, that was done at not at the planning commission level, but the city council level as well. And I think that engendered a lot of confusion as well.
Well, you're saying bringing forward.
There was a draft resolution of approval, and there was a draft resolution of denial.
I'm
so
not
Okay.
I'm not suggesting both at the same time. That makes no sense to me.
right, and I think that was the issue, and it was a burden on staff.
Oh,
Well,
yeah, that is a burden, I guess, yeah.
Well, if I can put two bits in, we do have a process that works, and that is that if there is either a question or there's a request from an applicant, the appeal process works, and it did in fact recently work, where a decision that was difficult for us to make literally was sent up to the city council, and then they took it on and decided. So that's already on the books, that we have an appeal process that works. Is that not correct?
There is an appeal process.
And you
I don't
but
want
you
to,
don't want to say it works.
I don't want to opine as to whether or not it works, but there is an
Okay.
appeal process.
Well, at that point, the elected officials ultimately make the decision as to what the people of Calabasas want. And that's about as far as we can go, I think. I'm okay either way in terms of, getting a staff recommendation, because to me, they've always been well-grounded, well-completed, and well-discussed by us. And at the same time, when you're heading into a complex set of circumstances like we are now, I mean, I keep trying to champion the idea of a look forward to when we actually have a GP in place that's current. I mean, we're in an AI world now, and we have cell phones now. And in 2007, we didn't have iPhones. So, I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that's gone down that, expects that our process goes faster or more sure or better in some way. And we do our best, I think. And at this point, I could go either way depending on what the commission wants to deal with. And as staff feels like taking the burden back on of making a recommendation directly, as opposed to waiting for us to say, please make a resolution to find that it's an approval or a denial.
Well, Dennis,
We
doesn't,
clearly established tonight that staff only brings forth projects that they believe should be approved.
Actually, I've been here a long time. There have been some, I could probably count on one hand,
Yeah,
but that's some,
with three fingers missing.
with proposed denials.
So
I remember the one on the lake.
I go
Oh,
back to
yes,
the
that's
issue
right.
where
At the end of Park Miramar,
Right,
or whatever, yes.
right.
I go back to the issue. The
forgot about
staff has brought forth a project that they recommend approval. Clearly, they have fought tooth and nail sometimes against things that are brought up. It's clearly biased when they do that. This new way is working. At least it gives a fair chance to get ideas across.
Yeah, I would recommend, I don't think we're gonna vote on this tonight.
Yeah, this is
I-
not on the
It's not
agenda
on-
either.
it's
I
so-
would
not a voting
recommend that,
item,
Michael,
yeah.
you consider the comments you've heard. There may be some more policy reasons why some people like the way we're doing it now. Talk to Tom or your colleagues in other cities. Other than I understand Bob's point really is a point about perception. With a recommendation, there is a perception that there could be bias, even though bias is a term of art. And putting aside the issue of delay, which is important, are there some other governmental interests that we're missing that go into the recommendation that it be done the way we're doing it now versus the old way? And I'm not aware of any, but I was sort of surprised when this came up this year.
Well, since it's not agendized, but the issue has been well discussed,
Right.
and I think
Okay.
rightfully so.
Well, and it sounds like it's not our decision anyway.
Right.
Well,
At the
but
end of the
why
day,
don't we
it's a
ask
staff
staff
decision.
or
Yeah.
direct staff to
Yeah.
work with our attorney before he gets out of Dodge
Well,
to
ultimately,
come up with a recommendation that we can put on the agenda to send forward if we so choose.
no, ultimately, this is effectively staff's decision. So just seeking input, as Commissioner Mueller said, we can take all the comments that were made tonight and then evaluate what process makes sense. But again, I do want to make the record clear that it is not our intent to come here with a bias on anything. We have a if there's a recommendation, it's because it's rooted in the fundamental zoning regulations and the direction given by the general plan. And I don't appreciate being told that our staff is unethical or doing things immorally, because that is not the case. Every person in our department, should be held in high regard as for coming and serving this community and doing what they believe is the best for the community and following all the rules that are set in place.
Thank you for stepping up for staff, because I agree with you.
All right. Is there anything else in your report?
That's the end of my report.
Planning commissioners, do you have any comments? Wendy?
No.
Dennis?
I was just going to make an announcement that there is going to be a very interesting class coming out of the Savvy Senior Program or the University of Calabasas programs we have on the 8th, that's tomorrow. There is a class being conducted, I'm sorry, wrong date, on the 14th from 1 to 2:30. There's an update from folks who actually went to Ukraine and investigated the possibility of us having at least a community or a city relationship like we do with some of the other cities around the world, dealing with ultimately what might be done to help the folks in Ukraine and in the world recover from this awful thing we're going through. So that class is on the 14th. You can call the senior center or probably the front desk and find out when that is, and it's being conducted by Igor and Elena Yasno, who literally went and toured Ukraine literally to the fronts and came back with a report, and they'll have a complete visual and personal report on what's going on over there. So it's worth taking a look at that and seeing if you have the time to go.
Thank you. John?
I would like to just to say thank you, Epi, for all your hard work. And even though we sometimes adjourn for other reasons, I think it would be appropriate tonight to adjourn in Epi's honor. if
That
that's
sounds like a great idea. We will.
You bet.
Yeah, that we will.
Best of luck. So that's a motion, I second it.
Yeah, we all agree with that, I think. But Bob?
I did, yes, I seconded it.
Oh, no, but do you have any other, do you want us to, we don't need to vote on that, I don't think, but anyway, because it's unanimous, so. But I concur with that and wish you all the best, Epi. And I have a question though for staff on the story polls at the Commons. Are they done? Is that it? There's no flag, no nothing? I mean, you can't see the top of those.
The story poles are installed.
Wow. Okay. That's
Proved that point.
You just proved our point, yeah, as Bob said. I guess with that,
Move to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it did. That just proved the point.